National Park. So please join me in a warm welcome for Beth Shelton.
Well, you've all proven you're a very good group of learners. You even now have the papers to back it up. Nearly 30 years ago, I learned to question the existence of reality in Dr. John Pauly's philosophy classes, and that he would provide the most interesting commentary feedback on my homework. For instance, when I wrote a paper about the existence of independently existing matter, on page 1, he said, "I like where this is going, ... By page 3, he had one word, and it was underlined 3 times, and it was meh. I learned that some professors take attendance and some don't. I learned that sometimes you don't really need to buy the book. And I learned that no matter what the professor says, there is some knowledge you will never use in life." And to the professor that made me run reverse regressions in business statistics, I am looking at you. Learning absolutely lights my brain up. But today, my simple advice is about unlearning. We learn a lot about life on paper. We proudly frame our embossed degrees, and we bullet our achievements on our resume. We start to count the accumulation of our currency. And from wedding certificates to mortgage deeds, we've learned the master playbook for accumulating all the paper. And there's some good things that come with that, some wealth, some influence. I know the parents and caregivers are in here are like, yeah, Captain Obvious, what's the problem with that? In the book Upstream, Dan Heath shares every system is perfectly created to get the result it gets. And everything we're in is a system. Our teams, our workplaces, our relationships, our institutions. It's just a collection of norms and practices. So the systems we're all using today, our mighty paper castles, how are they doing for the outcomes for the human beings involved? We're seeing epidemic levels of loneliness, anxiety, and depression. For the group that's 18 to 22, 50% of you identify by saying, if I disappeared tomorrow, no one would notice. 50% of you. And for the rest of us, the adults in the room, we are not far behind on that number. The Surgeon General says we are dying sadder and earlier. In 2010, I was 1 decade into adult life. And on paper, my life was falling apart. I was finalizing a long, painful divorce. Our 10 years of accumulated wealth quickly got transferred to attorneys. The mortgage crisis evaporated 10 years of home equity. And I drove with my 2 young children away into an 800 square foot rental. I had $300 to my name. My kids today would describe that old minivan as very crusty. But I worked in a job I loved. I had an MBA. I made at that time $44,000 a year. After rent, utilities, and daycare, I had $230 a month to live off. All of our food, all of our expenses, all of our medicine, all of our clothing for me and my 2 daughters. I didn't sleep for 3 nights when my 2-year-old was diagnosed with asthma because her medication was $80 a month. That was 1/3 of the money we had left each month. When my 4-year-old wanted to take dance classes, I begged the instructor to barter with me for the $40 monthly tuition. And she graciously agreed by letting me do some recital prep. So all of that to say, times were lean. And you might be sitting there thinking like, I sure hope that is not my life 10 years down the road. And I don't blame you. But take heart, as life does, things progressed. 10 years later took me to age 41. And now I had the life on paper. I was a CEO, a career that is profoundly fulfilling. Gone was the crusty minivan. I have a very comfortable SUV. The dashboard has more intelligence in it than the first computer I brought to Simpson in 1997. I have vanity plates just because I want to. And I've had the incredible privilege of speaking on stages all across the country, from the National Academy of Science to the Today Show. Somehow these thoughts and achievements I have hold weight in the world, and my kids are healthy. So on paper, I have made it. And at this time in 2020, this shiny time on paper, I regularly started visiting a discreet little office across town, a monthly visit with a therapist to talk about the weather and the plants and life and leadership. And one day we were talking about the foibles of something in my garden. And then I paused through gritted teeth and I said, please help me. Please help me know how I can take my own life without hurting my kids. And he said, Beth, I think you know you can't do that. Let's work on creating a life you don't want to escape from. And here's the really hard thing. I had a beautiful life on paper. And what was I escaping? Leo Tolstoy has this to say: people do all sorts of clever and difficult things to improve life, instead of doing the simplest, easiest thing, refusing to participate in the things that make life bad. But boy, did I try to outsmart Leo Tolstoy. It is a remarkable gift to survive rock bottom. It's the most obvious evidence that we get that our system is not working. So we get to unabashedly throw away everything we're doing with no ego, no excuses, no expectations, and we just get to start fresh without limitation. At rock bottom, I had a nice income. Rock bottom, what does that mean? I had a nice income. I read more than 50 books a year. I worked out 6 days a week. I parented, I showed up, I volunteered, I was on boards. I did the things. I even donated to random Facebook fundraisers of causes I've never heard of if my college acquaintances posted about them, right? I'm doing all the clever and difficult things to justify my existence. But if Tolstoy were like Dr. John Pauly, and if he were writing comments in the margins on the essay of my life, he would say, meh, what do you need to remove, Beth? What are you escaping? So for me, I had to remove a lot of things. I had to remove my false identity. I had to stop telling myself that I was terminally unique in the challenges that I faced. And I had to recognize and leave relationships that weren't good for me. I was a provider, I was a decision maker, and I felt so deeply the noise of the world, those piercing decibels at that time of overwhelm, isolation, exhaustion, confusion. And I marched through life like the warrior we're called to be as parents and as leaders, but my armor at times came from a glass. Those fruity undertones started to softly rinse the overwhelm from my soul. But I didn't realize it was really saturating my soul with a flammable blanket. And you're probably thinking, phew, I'm good because I don't have those issues, so we're good. And you probably don't. But I had the disillusionment that I could out-clever the system, that I could manage the outcomes of life, and I know that is not uniquely my issue. So here's what you can unlearn today. You can unlearn that rock bottom is not the only reason to start over. The humbling experience of starting anew can literally start today when you walk out of the doors. Life is not a manuscript, it is a rough draft. And you can unlearn that your worth is tied to any other person. Your sense of self is the most sacred thing you have. And if you ever hand that yardstick over to anyone or anything else, you will never measure up. Not to your parents, not to your spouse, not to your children, not to your job. And you can unlearn. You can never tie your value to things that the world can take away. So for the homemaker that gets divorced, for the athlete that has a catastrophic injury, for the professor who has a department that closes, those things are really hard. They are terrible to navigate. But they're not you. My job is to be a CEO, and I love it. I love being a CEO. I love being a leader, but that's not my DNA. Because a pandemic or a board of directors or even a momentary lapse of judgment could take that away from me. My identity is no longer a CEO. My identity is a person who loves collaboration, who loves solutions that change the world, and no one can take that away from me. I said many times in 2020, in my sea of hopelessness, you don't understand. Terminally unique challenges, right? You don't understand. I said it to my friends, and I said it to my family, and I said it more than once to my therapist. You don't understand. I can't do it. I can't leave this situation, this person, this place. I can't do me time. I mean, are you kidding? I was leading an organization and I had 3 children remote learning from home, right? You don't understand what I'm shouldering. I can't do it. And I got hope in the simplest feedback, which was, you can do it. You're choosing not to. What's getting in the way of that? Because maybe the sacrifice of doing that thing isn't worth it, but it's still a choice. Look, if mission control more than 50 years ago can bring Apollo 13 back with duct tape and tubes and land them safely on planet Earth, I probably could realistically find a time to work out once a day if I wanted to, right? It's not that I can't, I'm choosing not to because it was too difficult with what I was facing. You can quit your job, you can change your major your senior year, you can leave a difficult relationship. It's your story to rewrite. You're holding the pen. It is terrifying accountability, but it's also empowering freedom. You will grow, you will know very great joy and achievement, I have no doubt. But you will also know incredible pain, things that you cannot imagine. And as you draft those chapters in your life, just remember to add the and. This terrible thing is happening to me, and how shall I proceed? Then pick up the pen and write it. The one thing I didn't mention earlier about those very lean years at age 30, when those ramen noodle eating years as a single mom to little kids, is they were some of the most free and happy years of my life. And it took me years of perspective to understand why. And here's the simple truth. At that time, I had no choice but to submit to the reality of what was and to fully receive the love of the people who loved me. My poverty and wealth erased my poverty with connections. I also didn't fully understand that it's not our problems themselves that are so debilitating, it's the weight of them. We guiltily say, I know, I said this to my therapist so many times, I know other people have it worse. I know they do. I shouldn't feel this way. Other people have it far worse. And it's directly proportional to the resilience in our bucket. And I didn't know, as the ambitious 22-year-old who was breaking records in tennis, I'm like, if I have one hand and I can play college tennis, man, I have a lot of resilience. Good for me. You know, I'm so strong. I'm so good. I work so hard. I didn't really realize the gift that my full-time job was to go to class and be good at tennis, right? That's what I was doing. I didn't know that life pokes holes in your bucket of resilience nonstop, big holes and small holes. And we don't see it when our bucket is pretty full. But when our bucket starts to get empty, the weight of those problems, the proportion gets out of control. And that's when we get in a place of irreversible despair. The greatest fertilizer for resilience is human connection, period. A hustle-centric life will never beat a people-centric life. I leave you with this. I imagine any one of you sitting here could give me 3 pretty great accomplishments, 3 successes. I bet anyone in this room could do so. 3 bullets on your resume that you're pretty proud of, as you should be. And as you amass your accolades and your paper castle in life, ask yourself, do I have 3 people I could call? Do I have 3 people who would answer for me right now in my times of triumph or in my times of tragedy? 3 people who would simply bear witness to your full, authentic self. So your finals and your essays might be over for most of you, but your homework in life is just beginning to create and cultivate your people list. And in those seasons of life, when you succumb to the pressures and the overwhelm and the excuses and the exhaustion, pick the pen back up and choose to change the story. That is the ultimate secret to creating a life you don't want to escape from. Thank you.